next, we will go to one of our final panels. This one will cover app discovery in the gargantuan world of app space. And for this panel, we will invite our moderator, Richard Robinson, who is co-founder and president of Yulu. And with him, he will be joined by panelists Lu Chuan of App China, Tomer Kagan of Quixi, Oriel Oyan of AppsFire, and Niran Hiro of SearchMan. Welcome, and thank you.
大家好，吃了吗？我的中国朋友在哪儿？在吗 ？All right， 太棒了。我住在北京，北京在我的水里，因为空气污染那么厉害。开玩笑。Hi, my name is Richard Robinson. I will be your moderator of this interesting panel today. I'm based in Beijing, China. I've been there for 12 years. After 12 years, Beijing is now in my blood, but that's mostly because of the pollution. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Great. Excellent. So we have a really interesting panel today, already going head-to-head in the back room, talking about what we're going to cover. To my direct left, we have Lu Chuan from App China, also based in Beijing. Next to him is Tomer Kagan from Quixi. And to his left is Oriel Oyan from AppsFire. And then we have Niran Hiro from SearchMan. What we're going to be talking about today is the ever-growing problem of app discovery. Not necessarily for the end user, but for developers. How do you actually cut through the clutter? There's million-plus apps out there, probably 700K in the App Store for Apple, let's say 600K for Android, and then 120 for say Windows 8, etc., and then on to Amazon. So there's the existing app stores. So what exactly? Let's actually frame it first. What is the problem? What do you think, Tomer? Like what are the actual the challenges? Why is there a problem with these existing app stores and their engines?
Sure, I think the big problem stems from the fact that all these engines that you refer to are basically directories, right? And if you look at where apps are going in general, it's the same direction that the web was going into originally, right? Just like we had Yahoo originally for the web, we need better solutions than just a single large directory of apps. I'll give you a quick example. I was just in New York 2 weeks ago speaking with app developers for things like grocery store apps, barbershop apps, personal injury lawyers who have apps. These guys do not want to be in a top 10 list. They don't think it is going to add any value to try to make a top 10 list. What they want to do is be able to get discovered by their consumer base. And they don't really fit the precise model, right? So you have this model of a directory that doesn't really scale to this next generation of the web. An easy way to put it is, we used to have applications on our desktops, and then, internet got fast enough and technology got fast enough that we could actually run those virtually. And then we moved to the cell phone, the same thing happened. We have apps on our phone, and now as broadband gets faster and faster, more functionality is able to be introduced. And if you want to think of it in the way from the developer standpoint, developers who were providing solutions when the web first started built websites, right? And then brick and mortar businesses built websites, right? And average people built websites. And then what happened was during social media in the early 2000s, those same individuals came up and built MySpace pages. They built Twitter pages. They built Facebook pages. And today, every single person wants an interactive experience, which is an app, right? They want an app running on some sort of platform, and they want to have the ability to interact with their customers. And when that takes off, as it's doing right now, we're not talking 600,000, 500,000, we're talking millions.
Good insight, thank you. Ariel, we were talking about earlier that perhaps AppsFire could be the equivalent of like IMDb to Amazon. People use IMDb to maybe learn more about a movie and discover. Can you give your insights into what you think is kind of broken with the existing paradigm?
Yeah, I'd like to bounce on what Tomer said. It's true. The problem is there are directories, and to expand on that, they have deep diving into that notion of directory. There are three main issues. The first one is they are built the same for everyone. So if you go to the App Store, we're going to see the same thing, and it doesn't make sense. because we have different tastes and different history and different DNA. So we should see different things based on who you are, and you are not, right? Stores are editorialized and built in such a way they're the same for everyone. So it creates frustration after a while, even if someone is not very tech savvy. The number two problem is that they are very populated. There are a lot of apps, right? So it's like, very, very crowded out there. So you mentioned the numbers, but the real number is not the fact that there are 700,000 apps or 600,000 apps. The real number is that inside those apps, there is tens of thousands of developers that are extremely savvy at marketing their app. So they're all fighting for attention, and it's very hard when you are a new developer to get noticed into that crowd. And the number three problem is that the experience of browsing an app store, whatever it is painful, right? Because it's not thought first for the consumers. It's thought first for the stores, right? It's never forget that an app store is first a store, and the agenda of a store is to make money. So it's very, very, it's not perfectly aligned with the interest of the user. For example, when you see a top ranking list, the first top ranks that you're going to see are paid apps and not free apps, which is what people want first. So there are those key issues that creates this sensation that the discovery is
I really recommend the most expensive bottle of wine. That's what I recommend, right? So
something like that. It's like in a supermarket, right? They put what's most expensive first, but that's fine, it's store. Right? But that's not, it doesn't mean that discovery has to be solved that way.
Good points. So it's broken. The whole thing is busted, and you guys all have solutions to address that. What are some of the techniques that developers are using to kind of break through the clutter to get discovered? You're focused on the China market. It's a little bit different, but
the same thing is the users always have this problem, as just Tom said. It's a directory, and people generally find the difficulty of getting what they want. So here is that we come up with some kind of like scenario-based recommendation technology, which is basing on the user's situation to give recommendations. The developers in this case is kind of like very passive. They don't have lots of things to really get the things promoted. They even do not have a website because this is the mobile space. So even they have a website, it's not going to transfer them to an app download. So the developers are not as active as they used to be to do marketing in the web space. Here, so for as a app store operator, what we have to do is to get the most of the apps and get the spirit of the apps and trying to make the most relevant apps in the most appropriate situation. So the beauty of the smartphone is that there have lots of sensors, so which gave us quite a lot of information of the user scenario, where they are, and by analyzing the apps they're using, we kind of like know who they are, the female, male, professional, or students. So based on all those factors, we'll be able to make a much more accurate recommendation. So this is make that directory, although everybody says is different, it's more personalized, it's customized. That's how we're addressing that issue today.
Interesting. And Nero, you're more focused on keyword search, and that's one very viable channel. Can you just give us sort of an overview of, for some people who maybe aren't deeply familiar with what devs are doing to break through the clutter, all the different channels of social media or paid and unpaid?
So I think, as just like all these gentlemen said, the category structure is broken and it's going away, right? Simply human curated categories are just not going to catch up with the pace at which developers are innovating. And I think the solution for that on the internet was search. Let the users actually micro-categorize and tell us exactly what they want. And I think in iOS 6's release a few weeks ago, it became evident that categories are suppressed and harder to get to. It takes about 5 or 6 taps to get to a category listing. And search is, however, still prominent, and users can enter what they want. So that was one really sort of big moment, I think, for the industry. Because for 5 years now, every developer that at least I have interacted with, has sort of figured out a formula of how to game the category. So you launch the product, you make a lot of noise on the web, you get a whole bunch of social activity going, and then once you're at about number 100, you buy enough advertising to get into number 25, and then from there you sort of take off. And that whole sort of workflow that everybody's used to is now going away, and I think search is going to be the new battleground. What we do and what the savvy developers do, I think, is understand that in the iOS 6, when you search, you get one result per page. It's really painful for a user to get to result number 25. When that happens, even on the web, when that happens, instead of typing a single keyword, you end up typing longer, more descriptive keyword phrases. And that behavior, I think, is what Apple is trying to encourage, because if they don't get more signals from the users in terms of what they're actually looking for, I think at a bigger, higher level, it's going to be harder to compete with the other guy in Mountain View with whom they have a war. So what we do is we just help developers, the ones who actually understand that search is important, with longer descriptive phrases that make it easier for the Apple search engine to find their app. And I think that the last thing I want to add here is that even though we do that, it's really tricky, because the key difference between Google SEO and App Store SEO is that Google SEO is open. I can instrument my website today, go to Google Analytics tomorrow, and know which keywords drove how many installs or how many users. Apple's ecosystem is famously secretive and famously closed. So I think that too will evolve, at least that's what I'm hoping for, but that's what the savvy developers are doing today for discoverability.
So Tomer, in addition to search, what are some of the other methods that you're seeing that devs are using to crack through the clutter?
Sure. So search is still a majority of how people find apps in all different systems, and of course, even local-based search, even amazing products like Chocho from APP China still relies on the search on the back end. Even you get the signals. So search is still a large component. But as you said, other than that, we're seeing really unique, off-the-wall ideas. So for example, like being in New York and looking at these hyper-local apps, talking to them, one of the most successful things they've done is literally put billboards up in their stores of QR codes. We're seeing QR codes being used more and more. We're seeing apps working with other apps to encourage. Right? We're seeing apps turning into platforms. So for example, instead of having people just get to my app, I'm going to work with networks like Flurry, right? Networks that actually I can advertise and bring in people into my app. I'm going to be working with all these sort of advertising networks. Being a platform would also mean things like, you look at a company like Evernote, right? More and more, they just want other apps to build around them, right? So,
piggybacking off other platforms.
Absolutely. So developers, I think, are trying to be creative. But once again, I can't emphasize this enough. The same behavior that we're seeing was the exact same behavior we saw on the web, right? How do we differentiate? How you kind of get out there? We're seeing more real-life connection. We're seeing more piggybacking. We're seeing, developers starting to spend money on actually getting discovered. And there are really no good outlets. There's a few, but no, really slam dunk outlets, to buy users. You have things like AdMob and some of the bigger, like iAds, but those really cater to large brands who can basically throw money at brand advertising. So.
Good points, and I agree with you. Like as the web has gone, so too will go mobile. But for right now, there's these two, monolithic app stores, basically iOS and Google Play. Over to you, Ariel. Like, what are you seeing some of the opportunities, but also challenges in dealing with these walled gardens?
I'd like a little bit to challenge what has been said. I mean, it's true we're going through the same path of, getting discovered because there's a plethora of offers out there. But there is a major difference with the computer, is that on a mobile screen, you have very little attention and you are more in a passive situation. And it's very hard to put in the mindset of a consumer and asking to be very active about searching. Typically in front of a computer, you are on a keyboard and you are active with your computer. And on the mobile, it's very, very different. The time of attention, the time that you have available is very different. And therefore, the main driver right now, and it might change in the future, of downloads is by far lists of applications that are editorialized in the App Store. Editorialized by Apple, by Google, or the top rankings. Those, like, just to give you a sense, right? If you are right now #1 or #2 app in the App Store, just in the US, on a day, you will gain 100 to 300,000 downloads in just one day. right?
So it's a virtuous cycle, but also a vicious cycle if you're not
Exactly.
actually in
So
that.
there are ways to get there, right? You can pay, and this is by far the most used technique today. People pay to get discovered, and there are tons of ad networks out there, from iAd to AdMob to some that have been specifically created from the mobile, like Flurry, Tapjoy, and companies like us. But this is a very, very, very healthy industry right now. It's going on. And there is a lot of techniques that are free. Some you can control, some you don't control. For example, we didn't control that, but 2 days ago we were featured in the New York Times, right? And we just created a boost. So how do you repeat that? That's very hard. But there are things that are that you can a little bit impact, or I would say, fine-tune. For example, if you manage to create this relation with Apple or with Google to get substantially featured, that will generate massive volume of download for you. So you cannot pay for that. What you can do is make sure that your app is designed in such a way that it gets noticed. And if it happens, then it's bingo, right? That, again, is very, very hard to control, but it's very rewarding when it happens. And some apps that have been unfamous and from companies that don't have money have managed to end up there. And it happens every day or every week to be more precise. So just to summarize, lists right now are the driver, by far the biggest driver of downloads for mobile application. That will probably change in the future, but it's still the case.
So,
Nero?
my view is that this app economy is a bit like this Occupy Wall Street debate. 99%, 1% of the developers make enough money from social games and other things to afford advertising that you're referring to at $2 to $3 to $4 CPI. But 99% of them are unable to afford this kind of advertising.
I think the 99% are here. Let's rise up against the 1%.
I mean, it's just,
right now.
So it's very gratifying to see a lot of friends of mine in the social games business make tons of money and be able to continuously afford, $200-300 of advertising every day sometimes. But the vast majority of the innovation that's happening is not happening, in these 100 companies. It's happening across thousands of companies. For them, I think search engine optimization and just being better at search is important. Decoding Genius, as Genius becomes more prominent, and understanding what they need to do for that is important.
So Genius is the recommendation engine inside the App Store. Yeah.
And also sort of even decoding Quixie and understanding what does it take to sort of rank on Quixie or other alternative discovery methods like AppsFire and AppChina. I think there's a lot of questions I get about sort of what are the other data signals and qualitative signals that you think Apple is really looking at. For example, does the number of user ratings count? Does the actual, when you say keywords, do you think Apple's actually indexing the real keywords that end users are typing into the user reviews? To see whether there's any relevancy. How about third-party app review sites? How about Facebook likes? How about, there's all kinds of questions floating out there. And I think one of the biggest things that sort of the industry, I think, wants to hear from Apple about is like, what is the rule? What are the rules? So we understand what we need to do. We know that we cannot keep the user's interest if we make a crappy app. But if we make a good app, then after that, to make sure that people can find us, what do we need to do? And I think that's pretty important for the 99%, not for the 1% who can continuously afford advertising to boost market to get up to the top categories.
Good, and I'd also like to hear your thoughts. I mean, I know it's Google Play is dominant and, Android Store, the Apple Store, but, Windows is supposedly going to be shipping, 4 million handsets and maybe getting some traction, and there's Amazon as well, too. I think the next question I'd like to hear about China, but from you, Tomer, what are your thoughts on that sort of, battle between the app stores and how to crack that?
Well, you mentioned China right there at the end. I think, one thing that most American audiences don't really understand is that, Google in China is not a, dominating app store by far. People like App China, do far better. And so I think when you start looking at the global view of app discovery, it actually gets very complicated. You're not talking about one, you're talking about like 2,000 different methods, a lot of very specialized stores, a lot of stores that are carrier run, a lot of stores that are very language specific. In Japan and Korea and China and Southeast Asia, Google is not the dominant force there. So that's one thing to really note. I think when you look at all these various stores and the various means of discovery, like I said, it's very important for app developers to actually understand who their audience is. And I can't emphasize that enough. You do not really want to be in a position where you have to compete with 600,000 for 10 spots, That's not a position anybody wants to be in. You know, it makes sense to look at various stores and various recommendation engines, various communities, and see how you can get discovered and optimized in those communities to target a very specific group. So for example, if I'm building an app and I'm going to China, I'm speaking to these guys at APP China. I'm speaking to, Waidejai. I'm speaking to any one of the companies there that actually are driving users, and I might not be trying to compete on a very closed system like Apple's or Google's, where it's going to be a lot of money I have to throw at it before I can climb the ranks.
But sorry, just one thing. There are apps, and there are many of them, that have zero budget in marketing and that do end up getting discovered. There are a few live examples, just to give some of them. And they are not, billion-dollar companies or companies that have hundreds of thousands of dollars of budget. And they don't do any of those things. They do actually nothing at all except one thing. They do amazing apps. When I say amazing, I'm not saying good apps or great apps. I say amazing apps. So let me give you a couple of examples that are happening right now. One of the top grossing apps right now is a weather app. Weather app. There are hundreds of weather apps. It's called Check the Weather. It's an amazing app. I don't know if you tried it. If you haven't, go download it. It's worth every cent. The guys just released the app, and it's been talked about because the app is so amazing. Tweetbots. So the guys from Tabbots, they do a lot of cool apps, but they're mostly famous for having created the best Twitter client ever. Right now, their new Mac app, which is distributed only the Mac App Store, is worth the same price as OS X Lion, and it's the #2 grossing app in Mac App Store. Zero advertising, nothing, just an amazing app, and it's an amazing app. So if you create an amazing app, and that's very, very hard, but you can make it. If you make just a good app, it's going to be very, very hard.
If I can just jump in really quickly, I think, yes, there are some cases. The same way there's some cases of people jumping out of 5-story buildings and living, there's always some edge cases. If they're out of 600,000 apps, there are many great apps, and many of those great apps don't get discovered.
All right, I think it's time to start pouring you guys some beers. I want to see a full fight.
There are not that many great apps. I mean, there was a study recently that was made. The huge majority of apps in the App Store are apps that are nearly never downloaded, and I'm talking about 100 to 1,000 number of downloads ever.
400,000 actually.
Yeah, so that's the big majority of them. So that's a big number, and that means that quality in the App Store is not always there.
Right.
Thank you.
Actually, I just have to interrupt really quickly. Tomer just flew in from Dublin, and he was about to go on a pub crawl with Bono. I'm not kidding. He was at the founders meeting there, and he blew that away to actually come here. So he actually deserves a pint of Guinness, but I'm going to give him a Heineken instead. So anyway, please give us some insight into China.
Yeah, unlike the rest of the world where Apple and Google Play is kind of like dominant, China has a just completely different landscape. Number one is that the number of Android devices is amazing. There are already 100 million activated Android devices there. And Apple, iPhone is about a quarter of them. And the second is that unlike the rest of the world, Google Play isn't performing very well, being the reason that everybody understands that they hold a different viewpoint of how to filter of those contents with the government. So they're not a player, I would say, in their marketplace. So if you're really going to China, and by the side, besides that, the 60% of the iPhone are jailbreaked. So if you really want to have the services and going to China, have a big bang of the user adoption, the best way is going through those first-tier app stores, like including App China. When I say the first-tier app stores, it means that it has monthly downloads of over 200 million apps. So if you go into these app stores and go into those engines who will help you to being discovered and join programs with them, it's much easier by dealing with Apple or Google, where you have no people to talk, and where you have you're kind of like a no source. It's completely secretive. And versus you go into China, you have those app store operators. You talk to them. You kind of like have the treat or the good part, the great value of your services. They do join the promotion, join the marketing with you. It's kind of like more easy for the things to go big and use adoption.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I've been in China for 16 years now, and I can say that the Chinese market may have a perception in the West as maybe being just sort of a copycat market and maybe not as innovative. But I can attest to the fact that it's really not true. A lot of innovations coming out, but a lot of innovation also on business models, and there's also a level of competitiveness. It's almost like gladiatorial. It's completely ferocious. So with Google out there, there's been this very Darwinian sort of fight for the App Store. So it's a really different ecosystem. It's really more like the bareback internet than the sort of closed ecosystems here in the US. So maybe it's an interesting model to look at to see where things will be going once maybe it seems a little inconceivable now, but I think previously the operators dominated all the walled gardens, and now that's really kind of gone away for the most part for smartphones. And I think it's pretty conceivable in the future that next few years that app stores could also start to crumble. So over to you, Niren. I'd just like to understand how you guys specifically differentiate to help developers actually cut through. What's the actual secret sauce of what you're doing?
Yeah, so in some sense, we're doing an easier job than these three gentlemen because we're not trying to do a better discovery experience than the App Store, but what we're doing actually is sort of helping developers understand what their keywords are and how they are ranking against each keyword in the App Store. And from that, we sort of triangulate information for them about the keywords that they're actually doing well in. And where they're strong in, we encourage them to sort of double down and use more keywords that are more descriptive and more exhaustive so that the search engine has an easier time finding them. So we're trying to sort of make sure that we optimize for the 99%, at least for now, because I think that while you're right that there's a lot of apps there that are crappy, and as a user myself, if you're not 4 stars, I'm not even going to bother looking at it or downloading it. It's the same behavior I think most of us have on Amazon or on Netflix. If it's a bad quality product, you're just not going to bother if there's a big long tail of content. But there are many that are 4-star who haven't had the hit or the luck that that weather app that you were talking about had. And so we're just sort of making it easy for developers to understand their keywords and to get smarter about that. Now, the interesting thing I'm seeing is that the one thing that Apple has done is sort of created a global marketplace. So I think all of us have been in mobile long enough to remember when we used to line up with the carrier, beg and plead to get on his deck. And then we get on his deck, but on page 7, and then when we get rev share, it's 6 months late, and then sometimes it's 40% underreported. So all of that nightmare is gone, and now it's an open market, and you could be a developer in.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily an open market, but it's definitely it's a better nightmare.
It's a better market, but I guess what I'm saying is that you could be a developer in Hong Kong and actually get really, really far with U.S. consumers without having set foot in America, right? So now what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of international developers outside of US developers who understand that they haven't really done anything around keywords and descriptions and optimizing for App Store search, who are using our tools and other sources to figure out how do we make our app, which is made in China or made anywhere, more discoverable for American users, right? Because they all recognize that this is, in dollar terms, it's the most important market in the world. So I think I've seen a lot of that behavior, which is great.
And what about you? I'll jump around a little bit. How do you guys differentiate at Quixie? What's the sort of secret sauce there?
Well, in general, Quixie's differentiator is something called functional search. It took about 3 years to build, which is being able to find an app based on any description, 1-word, 2-word sentence, even if the developer never put those words down. The idea being the developer has to guess what you want is sort of kind of ridiculous. And the same way on the web that it moved from sort of a Yahoo directory where people put in their title, description, some tags, and then it turned into more of a, don't call us, we'll call you sort of mentality with Google actually crawling the sites. We crawl, every major app store, but we also crawl the internet. We crawl, blogs, we crawl review sites, we crawl everywhere we can and take unstructured data, right? Every time somebody's talking about an app, we go, it's like a link, right? Someone's describing it. So we pull a lot of data together, and the goal really is to be able to answer any question. Now, one thing that we keep talking about apps, I'm going to emphasize this again. We assume that every app wants to be downloaded by everybody. And I think it's a very false assumption. As the maturity of the space continues, you do see things like apps for diabetics. You do see apps like when I was at the Portland airport, I got the Portland airport app, right? I don't need the app here. But at that airport, it was the most important app for me, and I was trying to find exactly where my gate is. So there are a lot of apps which, help us in our everyday lives, but they're not going to be the apps that appeal to every single person. And we have to make that differentiation when it comes to discovery.
So as a developer, how do I best leverage something like Quixie? Is it sort of the Google model where I can pay to get pushed to the top, or is there or get featured in a search query?
Yeah, so we haven't pushed out any sort of sponsored system yet, but we are working on actually getting better SEO information out there. We're just taking our time to make sure that the information is solid, compiled, use cases of developers who follow step 1, 2, 3, and then see the results. So we're going to be taking our time to put something out that actually affects not just your ranking on Quixie systems, but everywhere. How can I get a global footprint? And that's one of our goals. But like I said, we're going to take the time necessary to make sure it's solid and I can actually help developers.
And you, Chuan, how you guys have been successful in China, wildly competitive. What have you guys done differently?
Yeah, we are kind of like a very focused on getting the best service to developers. So basically, we provide the three kind of services to developers. The number one is help them distribute, meaning that because we are an app store, so we actually collect them, we get it on deck with all those checks and making the check for adaption as well. So everything we help them to distribute. Second, we have a payment instrument, which is much easier and localized for the Chinese market. We have more than 12 payment methods, ranging from Alipay to debit card to credit card to SMS and to calling card, all sorts of things. Whatever user are used to, I mean, we can help them to collect money. There's a small SDK we can distribute to the developer to embed it. And the third piece, we also do marketing together with the developers. There is an example, like the Rovio's new title called Amazing Alex. When they are trying to get Amazing Alex to China, they're figuring out how they can best leverage App China. So we actually help them to localize the brand name. So we translate to 神奇的阿里, which is not a direct translation of the Amazing Alex, but it's much more search engine optimized. So people are easy to search because when people are searching, they type in. So you want to make sure that when people type in, the exactly word comes out. So all sorts of things will help the developer to even marketing. And we do also, leverage our own App China social network and our media network to help them to be creating a bigger buzz in the marketplace.
So international companies are making money in China.
They
right
are.
Now.
They are.
It's not just all about getting your stuff pirated. And
No. I think there are many international companies that being, making decent money. For instance, like Angry Birds and Amazing Alex and some other things, they get paid for some of the in-app purchase, and also they have a decent revenue from the advertisement inside apps, and there's also something by selling the merchandise of the birds of the Alex and the the.
Yeah, I remember Peter Vesterbacher was saying that they were one of the top 3 most pirated pieces of merchandise in China, Angry Birds, and he was really pumped about it because he's like, that validates where we're going, and then tries to sell his own. So over to you, Ariel. With AppsFire, I think it's another approach. Seems like you have, I think I read in the New York Times, 20 million uniques per month, and you sort of have your own community, right?
Yes. So what we've been trying to build is a delightful experience for this discovery, something that people would enjoy and would prefer to discover applications, like the step before an app store, like IMDb, you said, for movies before you go buy it wherever, Amazon, iTunes, or Netflix. So we've been really focusing on trying to solve this pain point of the user experience. And in particular, in any kind of situation, we don't want to input that data because you don't have the time, because you're lazy, because you don't know what you're searching or what you want, or you don't even know that it's possible. So we've created 2 things that we think are outstanding. The first one is a very beautiful, very easy, very fast browsing experience for the App Store. The one on iOS is way better than on Android. We haven't done Android well yet. The second thing we've been trying to do is to focus on being a trusted source for application. And the only way we found that we could do it is by building a quality rank for applications. versus trying to put the applications that are most popular. And the way we did it, or we're trying to do it, is by computing all sorts of quality signals that are either from or outside the App Store. So 2.5 years ago, we started to crawl Twitter and Facebook and review sites and blogs, and all that come together into run rate, which tells you whether an app is good or not.
Sort of like clout for apps or something like that.
Yeah, well, not more clout, but Rotten Tomatoes maybe. The clout is an influence course, it's different. But you could do clout, but it's not the case for apps. And all that together, all tied together, creates a delightful experience. People trust the application, people love to browse it, and it's sticky, and it creates this kind of effect. If you go on Twitter right now, when you search AppsFire, you will see the amount of activity there is on what people say about the app. And the second thing we've been doing is we've been starting to work with third-party applications and sometime operators to power our discovery the same way we've built it for ourselves. And because we are an end-to-end solution, we've built that for consumers, we know exactly what they feel like when they search or when they want to find an application. So we're working with very large applications out there, some that are very popular, some mobile operators, and we provide app discovery for them. And we have been also monetizing that part.
Interesting. So, I like the little disagreement before. I agree with both you guys. Hit-driven stuff, notoriously difficult to figure out, but you also have to make good stuff. You have to make stuff people want, or you're not going to have any chance, even if you're just throwing a lot of money at it. What are the tips that
one additional dimension that nobody's talked about, which is competitive intelligence. And I think that that's going to be a big thing for most developers going forward in terms of figuring out their app discovery strategy.
Like through Flurry or App Annie or?
App Annie, you can look up
Distimo.
keywords on Searchman, there's Distimo, but I think that, especially in a world where you could come up with the most creative and most awesome weather app, in about couple of weeks, there could be a competitor that looks exactly like you. And just being able to sort of not only grow your discoverability, but defend against competitors, simply because I think whoever it is and whatever the team is that approves the apps at both app stores, they're not really sort of conscious about carbon copy apps. And hence, the job is the developer's job to figure out how do you sort of block and tackle, right?
Good. We have 2 minutes left. I'd like to hear some thoughts from you, Joanne, maybe just 30 seconds each. Like, what do you think the future is going to hold? Where is Windows going to come in? What about tablets? What's one thing that you think's coming?
I think mobile is going to be overwhelmingly huge, and China is going to be overwhelmingly huge, especially for Android. I think in year 2015, there will be over, let's say, 500 million Android devices there.
So Android, wave of Android. Yourself?
I actually think that over time we're going to see the entire mobile experience opening up. It can't stay closed forever. It just doesn't allow for it. You look at something like Firefox OS going out in Q1, and that system is just all about the open web. It makes it seem like it's an app store, but it's really just HTML5 apps that are saved into RAM. So I really think we're moving into more open web environment.
Which is probably related with the whole Android sort of wave as well too. Yeah. And you, Oriol, what are some thoughts?
Future is going to be iOS, Android. Not going to change very in the next 2-3 years. Maybe Windows will make a jump, but it will be hard. During those next 2-3 years, native will still be predominant by far, with more and more presence of web OS. There are some amazing technologies already being built for web apps. One has been acquired by Apple recently. I've seen a couple of startups that are working about that. So you can anticipate that things are coming, but native apps are still here for a long while.
I think that if the rules of app discovery are not made open as well as clear, then there's a giant risk that developers will flee one or both of the platforms for the next platform. I think we've seen it with Facebook, where distribution and discovery became very unclear, and virtually every single social game developer who understood that, wait a minute, Zynga is more equal than we are, left the platform. So I think it's really important for both owners of both ecosystems to make sure that the rules are clear and give everybody a chance to grow a healthy business on the app ecosystem.
Thank you, Niren Hiro from Searchman, Ariel Hayen from AppsFire, Tomer Kagan from Quixie, and Luo Chuan from App China. Thank you very much.